Do you guys have any questions? Any comments before we go home? Aaron?
So from a very young age, my dad always told me, like, wake up. What do you think he was trying to wake me up from?
You're 29? Can I create the narrative?
Sure.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, forgive me. I'll self-indulge a little. I'll give you my narrative a little. Hello. My parents are immigrants. I'm from a third world, which means money is hard to come by. Life is just tough. From the moment you wake up to the time you go to sleep. You also have social chaos, political chaos every single day. You want a loaf of bread, as we did, you stand in line for 2 hours. You want a pound of meat, you wake up at 3 in the morning, you stand in line. By the time you get to the teller, they'll tell you, you're out, it's finished. So life is tough. They sent us here for, and this is what all parents do really. You send your kids to private school because it's something you never had. And in a very intuitive way, you kind of look at society, you look at politics, you look at just life and you realize how complicated and difficult it is and how vicious it is. And you try to protect your kids as much as possible. Okay? That's just the nature of parents. The moment they come out for some strange reason, you care for them. Now, as a kid, you may not like the way your parents, want to take care of you, the sort of demands they impose upon you, but that's what parents do. And so, coming to realize that I wasn't going to school. I was a dropout. I was on the tennis court about 7, 8 hours a day. Then I was on the soccer field for about 10, 15 hours a day. And that's not what we came here for. They sent us here for one reason, to go to school. Because way back then, America had this image that not only is it the best place to be, but it also has the best education on the planet. Hello. None of which, of course, is or were true, but nevertheless. And so, I remember one day being at the car wash, and my mom was washing cars, and it was, hello, I had dropped all my classes at Sierra College. I went to my mom very boldly, courageously, said, I'm not going to school anymore. And that's when I wanted to actually become a professional musician, but that story aside. What can they do? Nothing. They talked, they advised, they did this, they did that. Nothing worked. It was only about maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, where I began to think about what does it really mean to be an immigrant, to come from a third world country. As parents, my father was 50 when he came here, my mom was about 30, 35. And so, it's not like you don't have anything back home. You're leaving a culture behind, you're leaving a people behind, you're leaving your parents behind, you're leaving your friends behind, you're leaving your siblings behind. In other words, you're uprooting your life. I don't know if you know what that means. Just in case you don't know what uprooting is, if you have a tree near the house, go and cut the roots, the main roots, and the tree will die and wither away. Okay? So that's what immigrants go through. They're just not putting their bodies on a car or a bus or a plane and get themselves to a different location. They are, to some extent, really just cutting the entire roots of who and what they are. And they come here, they have no language, they don't speak English. It's a different culture. Basically, there is no culture, but, And so a few years ago, I began to think about this stuff seriously, the sacrifice that parents usually make for their kids. But parents are far too young to understand any of it. Now, let me now put myself on pause and look at you for a moment. And this is not about you, really. But let's say you are the first person born in America in your family. Your father, your mother, they came from a different place, right? So this is a very foreign environment for them. It took them some time to adjust. And what they realize is that first, you're talking about the 1960s or 70s. Racially, things are quite unequal, still are, but nevertheless. So it's really difficult for them to make money. They probably got their citizenship through you or something, you know. And so they know how difficult it is to become legal, to get a legal status in America. Then it comes you. And they say to themselves, this kid is going to have everything we never had. So they look forward to you graduating from high school and then going to college and then being done with college at the age of 20, then doing your bachelor's by the time you're 21, 22, then getting a master's, something they never able to accomplish perhaps. And to their surprise, you turn out to be very different. Your grades in high school is awful. Then they're waiting for this pleasant surprise that you signed up for some classes at some college or some four-year school, but that doesn't happen. Maybe you got crummy friends. Who the hell knows what happens to people and their life? And so they wait and wait and wait for you to grow up a little, but that doesn't happen. So what can a father do after a while, or a mother? They speak to you gently, like a civilized human being, but you know, as a young kid, you have this tendency to revolt. That's the right of every child, and in fact, every child does that. You know, they revolt because they haven't been around the block the way your parents have, you know. So you're a bit more imaginative, a bit more creative, a bit more hopeful, that you're exempt from the slings and arrows of life. You know, my neighbor gets cancer, but not me. My neighbor gets old, but not me. My neighbor gets robbed, but not me. So that's how we usually function in life. And so they say, you know, your parents are awake at night talking to each other. Do you think next year he'll be okay? Yeah, I think so. Next year comes, you're still a bum. The following year, you're still a bum. They wait and wait and wait and wait. And all of a sudden, something about you changes. How that change comes about, no one really knows. It's a mystery, you know. And then you see the sadness on your parents' face, but you go to them and say, happy birthday. This is my schedule for this semester. I'm going to go back to school. You know, they're both happy and they're both sad. Now, there are things that they understand, but you don't. They understand the value of money, you don't. They understand the value of time, which they don't really have, because you as a kid growing up, you took everything away from them. And that's what kids do. They take time, they take energy, they take your life. So then. I tell your parents I said hello, from one immigrant to another. Anyone else? Your name?
Chris,
Andres, yes.
is it a an idealist or a realist?
There was a guy around the 18th, 19th century. His name is Karl Marx. When he was young, he loved Plato, but more importantly, he loved Hegel. Hegel was an abstract philosopher. He wasn't very grounded in the sense that, you know, when you get married, before marriage, you have all these idealistic ideas about relationships, about love, about life. You know, that you're never going to end up divorcing, your kids are going to be all geniuses, that you will never have any disagreements with your companion because, after all, you know, it's you. So Hegel was a fellow who was really never touched by the realities of life. And it's what we call armchair philosophy, that you sit in your office the way I do, and you simply turn on your computer and you begin to imagine ideas. And then if you happen to be a little talented, a little creative, ideas come forth naturally. Okay? And so you begin to talk about this utopic environment where, yes, I'm going to go to my classroom, I'm going to talk about these ideas, I'll have 20, 30, 40, 50 very bright, very attentive students taking notes, asking lots of interesting questions. But you never get a chance to actually be in the classroom because you're on sabbatical. Or, you have taken some time off. But nevertheless, you can imagine all these ideas. That's who and what Hegel was. And Marx loved that because, when you're young and you can talk about racism, you can talk about all the stuff, and then you get pulled over and you have no idea why. And you ask, but the cop doesn't tell you why. And before you can say anything, you're handcuffed. And before you can figure things out, you're before a judge. And before you can do anything about that, you're serving a 25-year sentence. Okay. So we are talking about a time where society is beginning to change. That you're no longer living in the farms, you're no longer helping out with in the farm with your parents. You've moved to New York. It's a huge city. Lights are always on. Even if you want to close your eyes for 10 minutes, the brightness just comes through the curtains. And you want to create friendships, but you realize that it takes time. It's time you don't have because now you have the creation of factories everywhere. And money is difficult to make in big cities. And big cities also create a different kind of meaning, different kind of identity, different kind of purpose. To be happy in a village, you say yes to your dad, you get married to the person your dad desires you to get married to, and that's it. You have children, there's your life. When you go to New York, oh, no. Happiness is different. You have to make lots of money. You have to buy a big house. You have to follow in the footsteps of Beyonce or Snoop Dogg or whatever. That's what city life does. And when you go home to visit your parents after a while, they have no idea who you've become anymore. You talk differently, your taste in things are different, and you're very bold. You talk about sex, you talk about drugs, you talk about this, you talk about that, and your parents have no idea who you are anymore. Okay? And Marx comes to realize that what has happened to human beings in big cities is that they have become a stranger. They no longer know who they are. They're no longer following traditional values. Religion is completely dead. Parents, you can no longer relate to them because you've moved away. And even if you live with them, you have a different set of advertisements in the city. And there was something really interesting about Karl Marx in the sense that, unlike Hegel, you can see a homeless person like Hegel, and then you go to your office and you write a book about it. Marx sees a homeless person and says, this is messed up. Why do we have homeless people in our communities? What's the reason? Why is it that a 5-year-old needs to wake up at 3 a.m, go to the factory and come home at 10 at night? What sort of life is that? And so he walks away from Hegel. I guess in some ways he puts Hegel on the cross and nails him to the cross and makes sure he never resurrects. Hegel no longer begins to have any value for Karl Marx. And just in case, your taste in music, you may enjoy Justin Timberlake right now. There was a guy in South Africa who was a rap artist. Now he creates classical music. And the point I'm trying to make that people's taste, physical taste, intellectual taste begin to change as they mature and see life differently and see themselves differently. So being in the world and wanting to be a realist, wanting to know what causes suffering, what causes pain, why are people turning into robots, strangers to themselves, suffering every single day. You realize being an idealist, it's good at a certain stage in your life. It's like when you date someone when you're 18. You're an idealist. You ask ridiculous questions. You laugh at their silly jokes. When you're 40, you're old, you're smelly, you're wrinkly, you're ugly, you ain't got time. All the things that were luxurious to you, they no longer apply. You want a companion who's stable. You no longer want to pay rent. You want to own your own home. And so is it good to be an idealist or a realist? Do you have children? So I'm going to And my response to your question in this way: you wait until you find yourself a companion, regardless of your sexual orientation. Should you desire to have a child, okay, whether adopting or natural, you will have to eventually make a decision. How do you want your kids to be educated? There is public school, there is private school. Depending on your relationship with your children, how much you like them, how much you care for them, how much you want them to be successful in their future, you will have to make a couple of very, very difficult decisions. You'll either stay in Oakland, send them to public school, okay? Or you'll look at your wife or your husband, you say, listen, I'm gonna work another extra like 20, 30-hour shift to be able to send our kids to a private school. But why not just be an idealist? Just say, you know what, I'm gonna send them to public school. Let them come home with bad language. Let them come home smelling different, dressing different, being a bum. Or maybe the public school will not touch them because we've raised them so well. Or you study, you look at the stats, public schools in Oakland, crime in Oakland, violence in Oakland, drugs in Oakland. And then you say, well, you know, I sacrificed the first 5 years of my life for this kid. Do I really want to put him in harm's way? And all of a sudden you realize you're no longer idealistic. You're not a Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is a stupid hippie. He's ridiculous. He's useless. You want a realist? Moses. You don't have time to forgive, man. You slap me, I'm going to slap you back. Life is short. Consequences are dire, just in case you make a mistake. You know, if you cheat on your wife or your husband, Jesus says, oh, forgive. Let those without sin cast the first stone. Well, that's great if you're a hippie. Add to the fact that Jesus was never married, didn't have a wife, didn't have kids, so he has no clue what that means. He also left his parents, supposedly at the age of 12. So in that area, he is so detached from having an emotional relationship to his parents that he's just no good as someone who wants to guide you in life. Moses, on the other hand, oh man, he knows. He knows what happens when your identity is in doubt. Am I a pharaoh or am I a bum? He knows what it means to go into the desert for 40 years. He was married. He had siblings. You know, Jesus didn't have to lose anything. Moses, on the other hand, he had to lose his position. You know how difficult it is to be a prince and then be a bum in the middle of nowhere? The desert? And being categorized as criminal? This guy has tasted life, and when he comes back, what does he find? Well, you know, it's not good to enslave other people. It's not good to be passive. Yeah, if you're Mahatma Gandhi, you can have a bumper sticker. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Yeah, do that when your son gets hit by someone. I mean, sure, you can perform and exercise passive resistance, and it has some functions. But I think Malcolm X had it right. You can be passive for some time, but then, you know, pick up arms. Nothing wrong with that. So you could, again, be idealist by being detached from everything that you see, or you could be a realist. You make a lot of observations, and what you find is horrifying, and then you have to come to some very, very difficult conclusions and decisions. If you want further clarification, read some stories about the hippie movement and how they ended up. Or if you want more clarification, do some research on the 80s and free love and sex and AIDS. So Anyone else with anything? Matt, 23?
So then do you believe that like violence is justified to get to your end goal resolution, like political?
Well, there are a couple of things. Let's put your question within the context of one of the wisdom lessons in the New Testament, in the Gospels. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the left. Imagine I come over there and you're a devout Christian. I'll slap you on the right. Your body is really wise in the sense that it's instinctual. It doesn't need books. It knows what pain is. It knows what discomfort is. You know, it's like when you touch a hot oven, you don't need Jesus Christ to come down and says, remove your finger. You just go like this. That's what your body does. If I slap you, your body says, slap back. The only way you cannot slap back, if I'm Mike Tyson, and you're like a mouse. If I slap you, what are you going to do? You don't want to enrage me, do you? More? No, you just say, oh, Mike, I'm so sorry. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Right? Or you get into a fetal position, make sure he doesn't kick you in the face. Okay. But let's say we are relatively the same size. I slap you and you try to apply the Christian lesson. Be passive, turn the other cheek. Anyone who picks up the sword shall perish by the sword, right? So you turn the other way and I slap you again. How many times can you turn your cheek before your skin falls off your face? There will come a point where your capacity to be passive, to take violence from me, your capacity has been reached, it's maxed. Then you will act. Consider even if you very much enjoy being a passive observer of all the ills and injustices of society and politics, when Jesus gets on a donkey and rides to Jerusalem, what happens? He's a violent man. He destroys people's shops. He turns the tables over. All of their goods are all over the place. And people come and steal what they have. Then what does he do? He goes on the steps, looks at all the people, including the Jews, and says, this used to be a house of God, now it's a den of thieves. Well, that's not being very passive, is it? No. Why? Because Jesus had reached his max. His trash bin is full. He fights. So the point I'm trying to make is, the bigger your capacity for trash, the more trash you can handle. The less capacity you have for trash, well, the less you can handle. It also depends on your temperament. Malcolm X's temperament is very, very, very different than Martin Luther's. Jesus' temperament, he's an introvert. Introverts are passive. Introverts have a different longing, different questions in life. Moses is an extrovert. Jesus likes compassion. He likes being an idealist. That's what introverts do. They're always writing these books about how to make society better. Moses, on the other hand, says, I don't give a shit about society. The 10 Commandments. Honor your parents. I don't care if you've been abused, you honor them. Don't lie. Don't cheat. Don't covet. You know? And it's really not about your individual preferences. I don't care if you're in a good mood or a bad mood. You goddamn honor your parents. End of story. Jesus, on the other hand, no, you shit on your parents, and then your parents are supposed to forgive you. Over and over and over again. And then what you have on your hand is this. Everyone being spoiled and entitled. So it's good to be passive, but passive only in the sense that you sit back without reacting and you observe. You examine, you take notes. And then when you've come to a relatively decent conclusion about certain experiments, certain behaviors, then you say, you know what, this is not right. If the weak can't stand up for their own justice and rights, I'm going to stand up for them. That's what you do. So it depends on the context, the situation, on your temperament, on the capacity of whatever trash container was given to you at the moment of birth. Let me add another footnote to this. Hello. Let's say you don't like me. In fact, let's say you hate me. You don't like the way I look. You don't like my voice. You don't like the way I present ideas. And your temperament is an extrovert. You fight. Okay? Pay attention to who has power in this classroom. Who holds your future in their hand? Not you, it's me. You swallow your anger. You be passive in this class while attending, but you become active on your Facebook page. Say all sorts of nasty things about me without putting down your name just in case I find out. Gossip negatively about me. But in class, know who has the power. Respect that power. You don't respect me. You respect the power. And you respect this power because you respect your future. I'm only a stepping stone. Olivia, anything? Go ahead. What? Yes. That's your question? Did the answer satisfy you? Biologically, men are always behind by about 7 to 15 years. Ask any woman who has some maturity and experience, and they'll tell you. If you're going out with an 18-year-old, he's actually 10. The only thing you like about him is his body and the stupid ways he entertains you. You can't build a house on him. He's like sand. You can build things on the sand, but they'll disappear. And life creates lots of waves. And every time a wave comes forth, a tiny bit of the sand disappears, and a house becomes more and more crooked. It also depends what kind of love we are talking about. I mean, look, there is instant attraction that oftentimes gets mistaken for love. You can do that. It's fun. I mean, love is great, don't get me wrong. It's beautiful. It turns you into a poet. And it makes you into a sacrificial lamb. You're willing to sacrifice your body, your time, your energy, your future, your past, everything for this person. It's great. But if you love the wrong person at the wrong time, then you'll be in therapy for about 50 years. Was it worth it? Probably not. The way I think, usually, I'm not going to go into great details about this. The way we as human beings usually function is, first you love the things on the outside. And when you love the things on the outside, they give you value, they give you meaning, they give you purpose, they give you direction. It's beautiful, it's wonderful. Nothing wrong with that. There comes a point where just psychologically you just get exhausted. You want some independence. I don't know how it happens, like a salmon fish. You say, you know what, for some strange reason my life is great, but I want something else. Now you have no idea what the something else is. Hello, Kendra. And then you begin to see yourself without all the forces that live on the outside, whether it's your boyfriend, books, movies, whatever the case may be. You want to figure things out on your own. You don't want to like refer to the Bible every time your life turns into shit. You want to have wisdom. You want to figure out what to do. You know, and by the time you get to this particular place, most of the things that you used to find valuable have fallen from you. You don't really consider them anymore. And for the first time you say, I want to love myself. Now that's the stage you walk into. From loving the things on the outside that make me who I am, from screw all the things out there, I want to just love myself minus things out there. Now you run into a couple of difficulties. First, for the past 15, 20 years, the things on the outside have made you. It's like, you know, you're a mother. You've been a mother for 20 years and now your kids leave. What the hell are you going to do now? Who are you now? You've been married for 50 years. Now your husband dies. But what happens to you now? And the point is, the moment you begin to lose solid core narratives in your life, something about you gets devastated. So remember, first, as just living organisms, you love the things on the outside. Because without relating to the things outside, you're nothing. Okay? Let me tell you a story. There were two guys in a prison cell, an older guy and a younger guy. The older guy lived a very secluded life, very protected life. He didn't really have much experiences, but he was rich. The younger guy had a wealth of experience, but he was very poor. So one day, as they start talking, the rich guy gets really enamored, excited by all the stories this young kid was telling him. So he says to the young kid, every morning when you wake up, tell me a story and I'll give you $1,000. I'll just sell it to you, right? And you can give that money to your mom, your dad, your siblings. You guys can start having a good life, good physical life. And the guy says, it's a great deal, yeah. Just there is only one thing. Once I buy the story from you, it'll be deleted from your memory bank. You'll completely forget about it. Okay. Because he doesn't understand how human psychology and what it means to be a human being. Okay. So every single day he sells a story. And every single day he's diminished just a little. After about 4 or 5 years, one day morning he wakes up and the old man says, tell me a story. He has no stories left. He's nothing. And you know what he does? He slits his throat and he dies. He commits suicide. So that's how difficult it is when you say, I want to love myself. Because you have to get rid of all the narratives that you've created for yourself for the past many years. You know, when someone has trauma on the inside, they can walk away from the person who's traumatized them. But the memories are there. And what happens, especially when you're young and you've been traumatized and you keep repeating those narratives, psychologically speaking, they begin to create these like 3 or 4 different highways in your brain. One highway, you have certain specific emotions that whenever I get too close to falling in love, I step back. Or if I fall in love, I will only give about 10% of myself. Okay? And there comes a point where you say, I really want to give myself fully and wholly to another human being. But you have lost that ability. You have been in the habit of only giving 10%. Okay? And then you also have a certain way of looking at things, perceiving things. All men are vultures. And these are difficult things to overcome because you've been in the practice, in the business of thinking this way and feeling this way and behaving a certain way for about 20 years. So when you say, I want to love myself, well, you got to get rid of all these narratives. But you can't get rid of the things you don't see, but they function through you. You know, it's like the 70-year-old guy. He's the CEO of a certain company. But for some strange reason, you know, he just once in a while just screams at his workers. And then one day, you know, someone tells him, why don't you go see a therapist? Man, what's wrong with you? You're like 70, like Donald Trump, 80 years old, you know? And because he had lots of money, he hired one of the best therapists in the country. And this therapist took almost an old dead man to when he was 6, abused by his alcoholic father. And this old man wept, cried for hours. Because for the first time, he was able to see what he forced himself to forget. All that to say, you're young, your recovery period hopefully is relatively quick. Fall in love, just know that you'll be disappointed. Good job. Janai?
I guess to kind of piggyback, would you say money equals success?
Money does equal success. It equals success for your kids. It lessens your headaches, lessens the things you have to think about at night, paying rent, buying food, sending your kids to private school perhaps, changing your location where you want to live. Money is really, really good.
Create happiness.
Yeah, it creates happiness. Its shelf life is relatively short, but it does create happiness in the sense that money does give you security. Look, there was a guy many, many years ago. His name was Saint Francis of Assisi. Okay. When he went to the war, he had an experience, and he came back transformed. Apparently he saw an image of Jesus Christ, or had a vision or a dream or something. And his parents tried to knock some sense into his head, but it was too late. This experience, sometimes we have that. We have experiences that just overwhelms us and just delete our past completely. When you fall in love, that happens for about 2 weeks, but then your shit comes out. But there are some experiences that really just overwhelms the past, and they just completely get deleted for the most part. At any rate, Assisi becomes a monk, and he creates the Franciscan order. And for those of you who may not know, that whenever a new gospel is found, the Catholics get 1/3 of it, Franciscans get another, Jesuits get another. But again, so that's how important he is. One of the rules he had for those who followed him is, you need to be a beggar of God, not beggar of society, not beggar of your boss. And the way God works is this way. You will have no money in your pocket. Why? Do you have money currently in your pocket, Junai? See? You have access to your future. If you have $10, you know exactly where you're going to go, in and out. And you're probably going to get a number 2. It's a cheeseburger, fries, and a medium Coke. If on the other hand, you had no money, all you have is trust in God. Your future is unknown. It's insecure. And yet faith will sustain you. One of the things that money does, it gives you access to your future. Just in case I get fired, I have $40,000 savings. I can pay rent for 6 months. And hopefully by then I'll find a job. You have a peace of mind. So yeah, does money give happiness? Absolutely. Why do immigrant parents force their kids to go to school? It's a future they never had. They come from war zones. They come from poverty. And when you're poor, you have no future. You have no hope. And when you force your kids to go to school, what the kids don't understand is school gives you power. That power allows you to control your future. Now, will money buy you a good marriage? Probably not. Will it remove mean-spiritedness from you? Probably not. Will it remove the 7 deadly sins, pride, lust, greed? Probably not. Those, the definition for success and happiness is a different story. Remember, you have an outer life and you have an inner life. If you want to protect your flesh, you need money. If you want to protect your soul, you need money. So that you're constantly not thinking about rent and food and shelter and private school, public school, all that stuff. So yeah, money, good. Find it however you can. What is it? Is it Rosalie or Rosalind? Lee.
Rosaline,
Rosaline, okay.
what should or shouldn't we do in pursuit of happiness?
I'm sorry?
What should or shouldn't we do in pursuit of happiness? Because you just said it, do whatever you can to find happiness. It's not being
Can I give you a good version or a bad version? I'll give you a version. And Kendra knows this person that I'm going to talk about. We had a friend, a young man, or I had a young student. He wasn't really my student. He had graduated from Berkeley, bachelor's in philosophy. One day, this friend comes to class with this guy, just to sit and experience the class. After class, this kid comes to me and says, I love the class. I said, oh, okay, so what do you do? Well, I just got my bachelor's from Berkeley. What's next? I work at Zachary's. I hate school. I don't want to do a master's. I don't want to do a PhD. I just want to work at Zachary's. I have some stocks there. I can talk to my customers about philosophy. That's satisfying. Tragically for him, of course, he was talking to a kid, very disobedient, like our good friend Aaron here. Okay? I thought I could put my life together at the age of like 15, right? I liked him. And that's one of the things. You have no idea how all of a sudden you have chemistry with someone. Okay? I had just met him. He told me that he doesn't want to go to school, that he's perfectly happy working at Zachary's. So I waited and waited until everybody from the class disappeared. I said, can we go stand over there by the wall? He said, sure. I grabbed him by the throat, pushed him against the wall, punched him in the stomach, and said, if you want to come to my class, you need to go back to school. He said, okay. Right now, he's in Princeton, doing his PhD. Before going to Princeton, he was teaching. And the point I'm trying to make is this. A good amount of how you define happiness depends on who's been in your life and what influences they've had upon you. If, for example, you come from a relatively good, familiar, parental background, your parents are the best GPS to what makes a good relationship. In the absence of that, if you are missing a father, if you're missing a mother, whether physically or emotionally, well, that GPS is cracked a little. You don't have internet access once in a while, so everything shuts down. Not all the time, but most of the times. Okay? And so even though deeply you want to be in a relation that makes you happy, satisfied, there are cracks in the way you have mapped out, you have defined what it means to be in a relationship, how you need to be, how this other person needs to be. And so, idealistic, you want to be happy. Realistically, you don't have the tools. So a good amount of who and what we are really depends on the forces that come into us from the outside. Now, how old are you? 20? Let's say, and you're doing psychology, right? What are you doing? Yuck. Now, you're no Adam Smith, so you don't have the passion that he had. You're probably just doing it for, you want to be a CPA? Yeah, so it's a useless field. Now, I'm sure it has some benefits to it, but look, so you're 20, okay? And if you continue this path towards econ, you're probably going to marry someone in a cubicle who likes numbers. He'll probably, you guys will probably sit down, talk about kids, and because he's an econ major or does cubicle numbers, he'll probably say, I think I just want like 3.5 kids. And you say, why? 3.5 is a good number, right? Everything is about rationality and reason. It's all about numbers. And then, of course, after a while, you realize you're completely bored. The guy sucks as a human being, as a companion. You don't like your life. You don't like yourself. And you can't divorce because it's not in your culture. So you're just going to live a miserable life and then die a miserable death. That's your future. The flip side could be the following. Let's say you take a history class from a guy that I really, really like. You can YouTube him. Roy Casagranda. And there are some biases about him, but who cares? And let's say all of a sudden you begin to fall in love with just the way he talks about history. You say, man, this is great. Now, you're reserved, you're shy, you don't really want to be in the classroom, you don't want to be a teacher, but you love history because of him. Here's a virus that has entered your life. All of a sudden, the software that says to you, Rosalind, continue with economics. Even though it's yuck, and you'll probably marry a number guy, right? But just go for it, it's okay. But you just say, I want to go, I can't sleep, let me just listen to Roy Casagrande a little bit. And the more you have him in your life, the more he impacts you, the more he changes you. And one morning you say, you know what, screw economics. I'm 20, I'm young. He said in one of his lectures, ABCD, it's really true. I'm just going to study history. And you go to the counselor here, you say, I have like 60 units in econ, but I want to change it to like history. What do I do? And then you make some changes in your life and you double major. Minor becomes econ and major becomes history. Then you drop your minor in grad school and now you just major in history. And then you write this great essay and one of your professors say, next semester, would you like to teach a class? Me? I have nothing to say to anyone. Oh, we know that. But why don't you just teach this class? Nobody really has anything to say. And you see yourself in the classroom. You say, oh my God, this is really fun. And now you finish up your program. You have a couple of degrees. Makes you powerful. You apply. You get a full-time job. And now you're in the classroom talking about ideas. And you're not going to marry a cubicle guy. You're going to marry a guy who thinks he makes your life miserable in a different way. And then you'll have kids. And because you know the importance of history, when you read them stories at night, your kids, let me tell you the history of Israel. Occupiers and settlers. What does that mean, Mom? It means, well, it's like you living in a house and someone knocks on your door, throws you out and says, this is my home. You say, what the fuck? Well, that's not right. Yeah, I know that's not right, but that's life. Well, what do we do? Well, nothing. It depends how much power you have. And you got no power, so just live in the car. It's okay. Are we good?
Or here.
So again, it depends who's selling you what. Economics. This is America. You can do all sorts of things. Anke dandandahad nandahad. It's Spanish. Just kidding. It's Persian. That he who has given you teeth will also provide bread. History. Yes. Any one else? This question that I could like? Yeah, Matt.
How much should the ethos of someone affect how we view their ideas? Like Heidegger, for example, he quoted him the other week, famously with Nazi. So how should we take the character of someone into account with their ideas?
So there are two things. There is the art, and then there is the artist. I mean, Martin Luther King slept around. So what? Elijah Muhammad slept around, but he was the prophet for Malcolm X. So what? King David in the Old Testament had like 300 wives. So fucking what? There is the human side, okay? And there is this other part to them that makes them magnificent. I mean, why don't you talk about Jesus Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane when he says, oh, let this cup pass by me, or on the cross where he loses his faith? Why have God forsaken me? We don't think about those things. Why? Because those are just temporary human side of him. For the most part, this is a magnificent human being walking the earth. James Baldwin, he's gay in a time where gayness is not appropriate. But who cares? His ideas are magic. Muhammad, 22 years of prophecy. 22 years, that's all. Engaged in 40 wars. He had all these wives. Who gives a shit? So, was Heidegger fascist? Well, you have to look at Germany. Germany is completely bankrupt before and during World War II. And you know what happens when you're poor? Whether it's cultural poor or physical poor? You're hopeless, man. If you got no money in your pocket and you have never had money in your pocket, well, you're not going to dream about buying a mansion. You're just hoping that maybe you can go to Trader Joe's or Target and buying yourself a nice little tent. That's what you think about. That's the state of Germany during Heidegger's time. And you know why there is hopelessness? Because there is no one in your culture who can inspire you. When you're depressed, what happens? But you want someone to just pull down or throw down a rope so you can hang on to it, so they can pull you up, even for 10 minutes, so you can see the sun. So, for the first time perhaps in his life, and remember, Heidegger is a forest philosopher, and he's all about idealism. Think about death. Death forces you to reflect about life, about the self, about this, about that. And then Hitler comes forth. And then all of a sudden, Germany unites. You have all these people coming together. Enter the philosophy of being an Aryan, a superior nation, a superior race. You put all these together and you have Heidegger, who was hopeless, all of a sudden becomes hopeful. And he follows a cult. You could say, well, why couldn't he apply his own philosophy? And the truth is, the moment you bring any philosophy down here, it just turns into crap. I mean, look at Christianity. Look at Islam. Look at Judaism. It's all crap. I mean, philosophy began, let's just say, with Socrates. But look at this class. It's all about grades and assignments. I'm not here to inspire any of you. I can't. I'm not Socrates. I'm just a regular chap who went to school, read a couple of books, and here I am for money. That's it. I'm just here for money. Now, if you ask me, how do I apply ideas? I don't know. You're on your own. I'm not Socrates. So if, for example, you find someone who can inspire you, I mean, look at all these people who are following Trump. I mean, anyone with common sense. Just sit and just listen to him talk. Just listen to him talk. I mean, that in itself is quite embarrassing for an 80-year-old man. Forget the fact that he wants to be president. As a 70 or 80-year-old man with all those, hopefully, experiences, you should put things together eloquently. You know, you should have mellowed out a little bit to exercise a bit more compassion. He doesn't have any of that. But then, people who are devoted to him don't see those things. They have an idea, and that idea inspires them. For someone who's never voted, Trump inspires them. For someone who thought themselves to be not so racist, all of a sudden Trump inspires racism inside them. Inspires. And inspiration grows wings about you. And you find yourself to be just and fair and right. I mean, you can't dismiss the concept of eugenics. Eugenics is about getting rid of all the ugly things in life, including ugly people, and creating a Garden of Eden, kind of like Hugh Hefner. Now, you may not like it, but the truth is, if you examine your own life, while you shower, while you clean your room, while you want to buy a nice car, while you want to live in a nice place, it's all about eugenics. You worship beauty. You hate arguments with your companion because they turn your relationship ugly. You don't like anyone who's extremely aggressive. None of us in this class chase after ugliness. We're all after beauty. All of us are. Picasso was a horrible human being. Thomas Edison was even more horrible. And yet they were inspired. And their inspiration changed the world. Nothing wrong with that. But there is something that you ought to remember always. There are lots of crummy people in life. And by crummy, I mean life is tough. And almost 99.999% of the people, they're just mediocre. Even if they have like talents inside them, life kills it. 1.001%, they all of a sudden show their face. The way they talk, there's just something about them, magnetism, charisma. Who the hell knows what it is that they have? You gravitate towards them. For the first time in your life, you have found a hero. I love watching Al Pacino movies. There's just something about him that other actors don't have. Not even Robert De Niro. I love watching Cristiano Ronaldo play soccer. I always, when I sit in my office, once in a while I say, I want to watch Mike Tyson. I mean, you have a guy who expresses beauty in ways we have never seen in many, many years. Muhammad Ali, someone with a sense of humor, who can dance. Life creates these people once in a while. And what happens to us is that when you see someone like Muhammad Ali who's into politics, who is a devoted husband, a great father, beautiful boxer, you say, well, not only do I want Muhammad Ali to be perfect on the outside, I want perfection on the inside as well. We burden our heroes. We don't want them to be human. And then time passes and you realize they are human. But because you overburden them, the moment you catch them being human, you become disappointed. And that's the wrong thing to do. Jesus did shit. Accept it. He had a physical body. Physical body has a certain function. You eat, it needs to shit. You drink, it needs to pee. Now you could say that every time Jesus shat, flowers came out of his ass. You could create those stories to make yourself feel good. They're just not true. But you could create the stories. The other thing is, because we overburden our heroes, they have no choice but to carry all the things we expect from them. Not only do they have to answer to their own talent, they must also answer to our expectations, and it's way too much. Maybe once in a while you can find people like that, but for the most part, no. Was that, is it? Kendra? Self-pity. Anyone else? It's not about you.
Why is society obsessed with youth?
With what? Youth? I'm thinking about getting Botox and putting some stuff in my ass. I mean, my butt. Am I wrong? Look, when I walk around Lakeshore, no one looks at me. Makes me sad. I like to be looked at as an object of beauty, maybe of interest. But every time I see people looking at me and my wrinkles and my hair and my back being hunched a little, and at this stage in my life, I shower once a month. It's so difficult to carry my corpse around, And so I realized that people take pity on me. They feel sorry for me. So when, I drop something, they run and they say, please, let me pick it up for you. The fuck, I have some autonomy still. But no, they feel so sad and sorry for me. I want to be young, vigorous, and attractive, and relevant. Have some value. I won't look like Kim Kardashian. All aside. First, being young is great. Second, being old sucks. Do you have wisdom as you get old? Absolutely. Does your mind function faster than your body? Definitely. Do you begin to lose abilities? Yes. See, and here's the thing, that when you talk to God tonight, I don't know if you pray or not, but you should ask him a very serious question. If he wants to make people old, where they lose their abilities, they have to walk with a cane, and they're in pain, but God keeps their memories intact, and you remember how it feels to be young. That's the most cruel thing you can ever do to any organism. Take their abilities away, but force them to remember who they were and what they could do, and have them live this torturous life. Do you like to think about the moments you fell in love and you used to write poetry for your companion, or she wrote poetry for you? Do you want to go home every day thinking that? No. Probably get really, really depressed because now your companion doesn't even look at you. And when you guys are sitting together, for the most part, they just look at the cell phone. You like to think about those, go back and think about those young moments in your relationship? Of course not. So the first thing you need to understand about getting old is that losing abilities. And old people, all of them, knowingly or not, they're in a state of mourning or grief. They have lost things, and you can't take them back, get them back. It's impossible. There is another branch to this, which is the culture itself. Americans don't like death. Americans don't like old. And that's relatively new. And it's new because power, money, middle class, advertisement, our heroes. Let me give you an example. Imagine a few years ago, your definition of happiness was to go to school, mature your intellect, get married, have a few kids. And that particular set of advertisements were given to you by your mom, by your dad. Okay? All of a sudden, with the advent of technology, what you have is Beyonce coming on TV. Half-ball Super Bowl, commercial. She's driving down the hill, topless. The car is. Or maybe she's as well, right? To her right, forest. To her left, the ocean. She's driving down and she's singing, right? If you want to think, put a ring on it, right? And by the time she gets to her destination, which is her ranch, she looks at it and says, "This is what it means to be happy." And now you have a culture that puts its faith and trust in people they don't know. You know your father, you know your mom. They don't want your life to turn out bad. Beyonce doesn't give a shit about you. She's just part of the system. She's trying to sell you something. In her case, she's trying to sell you a Mercedes-Benz and how a Mercedes could buy you happiness. So if you look at our culture today, what you realize is that the superheroes are the rap artists, musicians with just bad music, actors who are alcoholics, right? These are our heroes, and they're always young. At least that's how they are on the cover of a magazine. And the rest of us, because we are sad, pathetic bunch of creatures, we have no choice but to gulp this information down and say we want that. Now, the reason for that particular version of happiness is what we call secularism. That everything has been turned into meat. No one cares about how you're on the inside. No one cares about how you think, to what extent you're mature. And so when you redefine success and happiness, well, you have a different categories of creatures walking around. Remember, money is important. Being young is very important. You just need to know what to do with it. I mean, if you're young and attractive, don't just say yes to any loser who comes your way asking your hand for a date. You know, I mean, you're beautiful, just wait. And when someone comes, ask him questions, good questions. And if you find like a 40-year-old, make sure you hook them. And then kill them and take their money. Anyone else? What time is it? Oh, we have 4 minutes. Anyone else?
I just had to do something.
It's too difficult. And there are too many things involved. And, you know, I'm a little tired. You know, self-pity is about just feeling sorry for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because you ought to. It's actually good. It counters one of the sins, which is pride. You know, you think you're great, you think you're this, you think you're that, all of a sudden life craps on you, and you know what to do, you try, you can't get yourself out, and then you say, oh man, I'm so awful. My life is bad, I'm this, I'm that. That's where self-pity comes from. So, you have to talk about the repeat of narratives, psychology, outer forces, support system, the things you're interested in, care about. It's just too fucking much. Forgive me. Anyone else? And there's also the temperament that's involved. You know, some people are just born to be sad. Nothing wrong with that. Some people are just born to be gloomy. Some people are just born to be happy, positive. Take the issue to God when you die. So, I mean, hopefully you'll like resurrect and God will ask some questions. Anyone else? We have like a minute. Begin. Excellent. Kasara? Aaron? Terry? Andy? Useless. Andres? What? How's my day? After this class, not very well. It's okay, it's good. Yeah. Gonna go home, take a nap. Hopefully I won't wake up. That's a good death, man. That's a great death. To end up in a nursing home, cancer, that's a bad death. We'll talk about that. There are 3 or 4 different kinds of death. And you guys are young, you should start thinking about that. So by the time you're like seasoned, like 50, 60, 70, you know how to approach it in a healthy way. Well, anyone else? Before we go home? Another day of joy. Great class. Some very happy ideas. Okay, so listen, have a nice weekend. Tell your parents I said hello, even if they don't like you.